Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of High Stakes. I'm Paige Soya, managing partner of K Street Capital, and today's episode is all about how women invest in venture. So we've got one of our co-investors on today, Julie Castro Abrams, who's the GP and founder of How Women Invest. And before we kick it off, though, Julie, I would love for you to do a quick intro and just share a little bit about your background.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of interesting. I'm not your usual venture capitalist. I actually started my career as really working on justice and economic justice, right? And so I actually helped over 6,000 low income and moderate income women, half in Spanish, to start their own businesses and did microfinance for them. It was a regulated type of a bank through the federal government as part of what I did. And it was magnificent. And I'll tell you, you learn a lot about what it takes when someone's very low income to be able to build a company and survive. And I started doing that page 25 years ago, and these women are still in business, so many of them, which is like a testament to like the ripple effect. What can happen if you actually help people start and grow great companies? And the other thing I would say, is like, I'm a student of ecosystems and sort of capturing a moment in time and really aggregating all of our power and wealth and influence to move a needle. And so I'm about systems change. So I want to drive change that makes it so there's more economic opportunity for everybody and fewer people are left out of the system. And the great news is right now, there's a moment in time in our society where we have huge opportunities for change that are going to be super sticky. There's already massive change happening, but I'm really jazzed about sort of where we're going in the future. So I don't know, that's a convoluted answer, but the truth is I'm much more of a student to the systems and science than I am let me just make an investment.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true from our prior conversations. And I mean, this isn't like your first fund either. How long has How We Women Invest existed?
It is young. It's three, we have three funds, but we just started in 2020. So the interesting thing is, as most women, I started my first fund thinking I'm going to do a proof of concept. I'm not going to have a goal that's so big that it is, whatever. I want to know that I can succeed and build systems. So it's like a little $10 million fund, which in venture land is a very small fund. And so I raised it in like a couple months in 2020. And then what was very interesting is I actually watched the behavior of these women investors. Of course, also the founders. We sold we sold two companies within 18 months and returned 34% of the capital to our investors before they even had their third capital call. Like people were just thrilled.
Wow.
So we've sold four companies out of that portfolio already, and we're not even in what they call the harvesting period in ventures. So you see the data about women founders outperforming, and not a single company's gone out of business. All of them, have grown and really disrupted markets, and all of them have an impact with the work that they're doing. So this is all stuff that you see in the data, and it's just wonderful to be like, I'm living it, I'm watching it.
So cool.
We have 600 first-time female investors in our three funds. Think
Oh,
about it.
wow. I
And
was gonna
what's fascinating is we've really learned that
600 first time, you're saying. First time.
first-time
That's
investors in
pretty
venture.
amazing.
And what's interesting is all of these women no one ever invited them to invest in venture before. Like me, when I first started looking at it, they had a lot of myths or biases that they kind of, they thought you had to put in, many millions of dollars, so you had to be uber wealthy. They thought that you had to know a lot to pick the companies. It's like all these things where it's like, no, actually, it's not all that unlike a mutual fund in the public market. Somebody who's an expert picks the portfolio, makes manages the portfolio, and gets you
Then
all
you
the
get a
legal.
cut of the
Yeah,
returns.
you just have to decide how much you want to invest and pick the institution, the manager, if you will. But there's just a lot of myths, and so we just tried to make. We know I am one of them. So it's like, listen, people are too busy. The women operators I know are super busy. But also, if you say to them, $25,000 is the minimum investment amount, and it's spread over 4 years, it's just $6,250 a year. your behavior, your intellectual
Opens the door,
analysis of
right?
that is like, well, that I can do. That's not a big, that's easy. So there, if you give people an opportunity to say an easy yes, and you don't make it too much work, you just say, hey, it's one call, and then you fill out a couple forms and you're done. Like that's it. And that's all you need to help women understand, easy entry point, both in time and cost. And then most, on average, they invest $75,000. So 25 is the first conversation. And then once they think about it, they're like, well, I could do more than that.
Well, I think that's an interesting question to ask you because from fund one through one three, I'd be very curious, like how that investment allocation for those early women LPs in Fund One has changed over time. Because at least, and we're not exclusively a women focused fund, of course, and we don't have only women LPs, but I have noticed that with our women LPs that started out with sort of like they want to dip their toes in, they want to get started and learn about it, but then once they feel like they understand it, they put a lot more capital
Yeah,
towards strategy.
100%.
Yeah.
And they also will invest in two and three other funds. And that's what I
Right.
think is really interesting. Like we actually do little every year we do like how, have you changed what you're doing as an investor? And they really are not they're getting into it. They love it. And so as an ecosystem builder, I feel like we're sort of a wedge and we're starting conversation with people that I help them get a board seat. I do a lot of other stuff in the women's leadership space, as you know, Paige. And so we're kind of a trusted, easy first step. And then I can say, hey, here's another a woman-run climate fund or a woman-run healthcare fund, and they, get to know them. I'm not advocating for them, but here's a list of them. And that's a super easy conversation. And the power in empowerment, if you will, I don't believe in empowering women. They already have power, but that sense of like elevated, like, wow, like this is really good for my career. It's good for my board journey. I love being in the know of the innovation ecosystem. There's a lot of benefits outside of just making money.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people my age, I'm older than you are, but I'm in my 50s. A lot of people my age, they're like, listen, I don't want a full-time job, but I got a lot more to contribute. And, I can be on boards, I can invest, I can be part of this ecosystem and elevate, the people that I think are doing good work.
Exactly. Yeah. And what do you think, or you probably know the answer to this, but what's the current state of things? Like, what's the current state of women investing as LPs in venture capital or as angel investors, even?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to start with actually the state of the opportunity. In 2010, there were only 12 women-run venture funds in the United States. When you look at them, quite a few of them were more like angel networks almost, and they
Sure.
weren't making big investments. And some of them, some of what they did, whatever, some of the way they behaved was early entrance stuff where they were so careful that they made people to go through a gauntlet of due diligence in ways that was frankly inappropriate, right? We now have 380 women-run venture funds in the United States. So the market is wholly different. Professional, deep experts, people who have worked in other venture firms, people who, you've got narrow, like there's a friend of mine, she started a firm that's all supply chain, another, like there's just you can get any kind of area of focus you want to have in terms of venture. So what that means is if I'm a woman operator, and I'm saying operator because if you inherited money or you married into money, you have a very different relationship with the investment risk. But because of that, like if I'm a doc and I've seen or of the dearth of tools or whatever in healthcare, I'm gonna really be interested in a fund that's solving for some of the things that I've actually seen as a professional. And I'll get it, I understand it, I think I can add value, or I can at the very least like really understand how, why this is important. And so I actually think that we have a beautiful moment where the explosion of women engaging as investors in venture is upon us, because of people, like you, like these amazing women, with tremendous expertise that they can, that they want to be aligned with. So I'll tell you, like 85% of the people that I talk to about it invest. It's a kind of a no-brainer. And if I'll go speak with an audience of 300 to 500 people, and I'll say, hey, raise your hand if you have at least $25,000 in your retirement account. of course, everybody raises their hand. And if they don't, we're like, all right, well, if you don't raise your hand, we're going to have another conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you can invest in venture if you have $25,000 saved in a long-term asset. It doesn't have a tax, it's not a taxable event. You just move it over to a different tool, a self-directed IRA tool. That, if you say to that to people and you say you already have that money set aside for retirement, there's no decision tree about long-term versus short-term gains. You literally are just moving money over, and look at all the value and benefit you can get for yourself professionally. Not to mention, this is a wealth creation tool that is beyond public markets.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think just for our audience, when we talk about how women invest, I mean, we can talk about it in different ways, but I mean, women invest in venture as angel investors. They invest as LPs in funds, like in your funds or in mine. They invest as, as venture capitalists themselves, right? Becoming their own GP and starting their own funds, sort of similar to us. But
toe dip and do a little crowdfunding, which
yeah,
really, there's some very mature crowdfunding tools these days too.
yeah, and I think like how do you think about we don't think of, it's funny because we're not as focused on this as you are and your firm is, which I think is super cool and important, and I'm so glad you're here talking to us about it. But like, how do those women think about what they should do? Like, should they be an LP in a fund? Should they be an angel investor? Probably they're not, if they probably know enough about it if they're going to be a general partner and start their own fund, I'm guessing in most cases. But like for the first two, I mean, what do you see when you talk to women who have never invested in venture before as being
very interesting? I think that's a great question, because if you want to look at this as an investment strategy, a diversified venture vehicle with an expert manager is going to be, the equivalent of saying I'm going to invest in a mutual fund or an index fund, right, in the public markets. That is actually, our data says that women are better suited to that kind of investing. Men are more likely to invest in single stocks and lose money, and women are actually more effective investors. That said, a lot of us get into this because a friend of ours starts a company and she says, would you be an angel and put in $10,000? And so that is not generally how you make money. Angel investment into a friend's company is something I've done. I assume you have. A lot of us have done that. You basically know that that's like lending money to your brother. Don't expect the money back. Like, don't get stressed about it. If you're gonna be stressed about that $10,000, do not do it. So yeah. Be ready for that money to get, not only go out of business, but be diluted many times. And so nobody does real diligence on their friend's company when their friend says, be an angel investor. It's so early, there's not even that much to look at. It's just like, I think my friend's got a, is there a reasonable chance that this is not just throwing money in the garbage, right?
Right.
But the truth is, when I talk to people, we have research that shows that women's investing behavior, and we're more likely to invest responsibly in a vehicle that is diverse. If you think about it, a venture fund, usually 10 to 20 investments in a portfolio, right? I see, I'm sure you do too, I see 100 companies to make one, maybe two investments.
Yep, exactly.
And I have a team doing diligence, and I have a bunch of tools, and I can look it up on PitchBook and look at the comparables, and I've got a legal team looking at the deal terms, and I've got, I remodel everything, and I've got AI analyst tools and a full-time analyst. It's a lot of work. To think you're going to be able to do all of that and create a diversified portfolio as an individual, and then you're going to be able to save money like venture capitalists do. I save half of my cash for follow-on investments so that we don't get diluted, and I can double down on the winners. That's not likely to happen for an individual. That would be super rare. So
yeah, it's an interesting thought. I wasn't really thinking about it the way you're thinking about it, where you're it's true. Like, I mean, if you're not in an organized syndicate or an organized group of sophisticated investors sharing deals together regularly and building out your own basket, then angel investing it's everything you said is true, I think. And for us, we've seen that we have our funds, right? But we have a syndicate as well. And the syndicate, most women that I meet that want to get into investing, they always want to do the syndicate first. They always want to try it. They always end up investing in the fund later, like once they understand it. But at first they're like, I kind of want to be in the room and hear what's going on and get a little bit more involved in it and really understand the kind of companies that venture really is for. And like start to build my own basket, but then after a while, it's like to your point, you need like 20 companies to have be, good, and they need to be,
but this is the thing, like it's rewarding to be in the room and to learn and to feel like you're not just handing money over to someone blindly and not having any insights. And so we actually do this thing where, we start people with just a minimum of 25,000, right? And we invite people to an investment screening event once a month where you get to hear 3 to 4 companies pitch. And we have, you get to put questions in the chat.
That's really cool. And that's part of your fund as being an LP in the fund. You go, I love that.
And somebody curates the questions, asks the questions. And I think you learn more from seeing the other questions other people ask than and you also realize, oh my God. Because every company's, one, you got a geneticist. The next one, you got someone who's a molecular biologist extracting, copper from the ground with microbes. Like, you got this very interesting plethora, the plethora of deep science and technology tools. And you start to realize, wow, you need people who really know what they're doing to ask these great questions, because there's no way. It's kind of humbling. But you get to look, under the hood, and then sometimes, but not all that often, some of those companies we end up ultimately investing in. We'll see a lot of companies every week and just bring a handful once a month in front of our LPs, just so they get a chance to check it out. And they can raise their hand and say, oh, I'd love to do an individual investment or support this company as an advisor. And
that's awesome. But you don't manage that. That's between them and the company. They do that on their own if they want.
The other thing that we do is we bring women VCs in different industry areas and founders every month to a call that we call it How She Invests. So in August, it was Ed Tech, because right before school, right? So we had 3 great educational technology and innovations, the founders, and then we had 3 great VCs in Ed Tech, the biggest, most well-known women Ed Tech leaders. And you do an overview of the whole educational technology landscape. What is different today, and what are we projecting it's going to look like in the future? Who are the big exits that have, who has had big exits and why? What are the barriers? And then you hear from the VCs and the founders. So if you're an LP in my fund, you learn a ton. And still, some of them, like you said, kind of are like, yeah, I think I'd like to really, and it's like, just trust me, just do this first. Is kind of what I try to get people to understand. That's like, you'll get plenty of exposure. And then every time we make an investment, we bring them bring founders, and, we have these monthly calls, and we bring the founders for people to meet them, and they, then we do retreats, and they get to hang out with them on a weekend if they want. And, pretty
It's such a great experience for them to get to have and meet people and just learn, really like understand the asset class better. And I guess I'm just wondering, because people always ask me, like, how do you get, and especially male GPs ask me this question, interestingly, is like, how there's obviously, everybody knows there's this huge amount of wealth locked up with women, and not locked up, but with women, right? Like, women control a large portion of wealth, and a lot of them aren't necessarily investing in VC or just starting to get into it, and things like what you've built, I think, really help that a lot. And it's not our focus area, but obviously I am a female GP, and so I have probably more women LPs than other firms might, but not as many as I would like. But they're always asking me, like, well, what is the archetype of a woman a woman LP that wants to invest in capital? Like, how is that different from like the other archetypes that tend to invest?
It's the perfect question, Paige. Because this is my experience. If you're an operator, if you've been inside industry, especially if you've had any exposure to venture investors, right? The good, the bad, and the ugly, because some VCs aren't so great to work with.
It's true. Very true.
You get it. You have enough confidence and understanding of it, and women. So for those guys, my experience is they don't want to touch that broy, gross behavior with a 10-foot pole. The stuff that we saw the Facebook movie or whatever. Like they really don't want to be involved in that. So you are a perfect person for them to get to know because you don't behave that way. So those operators don't have time. So if you respect their time and you make it a super easy yes, both in terms of the financial bar, etc., then they get in the game. Women, my experience is women who inherited wealth and are custodians of others' wealth have a lot of fear. And they're the
That's
ones
interesting.
everyone goes to first because you're like, oh, here's this billionaire, millionaire woman, right? She's very visible. Her husband was the first guy at Facebook, whatever it is, right? I've had a lot of meetings with those people, and their fear and concern over losing money is so intense. You can't even get them you end up in this spiral conversation, and you're like, I can't have any more meetings with this person. Like, and
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking
yeah,
about.
well, women GPs say it to me all the time. They're like, I don't have any female GPs or LPs because every time I have one of these meetings, I feel like they're so scared. And so I think it's the archetype of who is the right person. Somebody who's grown up in industry, they get it. And I think the other thing is, I actually do group calls. And there's something about having 10 people in a call that are all exploring the fund and me controlling the conversation. And basically, I say to them, hey, listen, like I've done this with 1,000 people, I have 600 LPs. Hang on to your questions because I will answer 99% of them by the end. And so they don't have to feel like they have to ask questions or they want to show how smart they are, which is part of what we all do. It's human behavior. Be a
Of
student of
course.
human behavior and life's easier. And the group dynamic helps manage their excitement and their anxiety because
Oh,
it's not like I'm doing a one-off call with them where they have
they
like,
feel
feels like they
intimidated
didn't
and
ask enough of the right questions.
right, right.
It's a different, you don't want to, nobody wants to be stupid. No one wants to make a mistake.
I think
And
that's a really good idea.
yeah,
That's a really interesting way to think about it for women.
yeah,
Yeah.
it
Um,
really works, Paige.
yeah.
I'll tell
Do
you.
you, do you think then, based on everything you just shared, like I'm just making this up as we're talking here, but I'm just curious if this makes any sense. Do you think that women who are maybe earlier in their careers but have been operators or understand tech at least a little bit from certain experiences they've had or whatever, then they maybe get started in venture with small clips of money here and there just to get into the space and start to learn about it? Eventually those women will end up being, the wealthier, like billionaire people later on, hopefully that deploy a lot of that capital. And maybe by having this experience and investing over the next decade or two, by the time they get there, they realize that that's a strategy that they should employ and the fear is gone, right? Like a lot of that fear, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. The answer is probably mixed. There's different people, right? I
Of
have
course.
kids. I have three adult children, and one of them is super assertive and has done different investing vehicles, and the other two are not there. And they all have probably similar amounts of money. They all work in tech and make good money. Um, this is the thing. In your 20s and 30s and early 40s, your job is to build, build your career, build your home, family, all those, you're just growing and building, and all your energy is focused on that. And a lot of us, like, I don't even remember my 30s. I was so tired. I was just trying to survive. And my kids were like, Mom, you never stayed awake through a single Disney movie. I'm like, I'm sorry. Like,
No
we're,
chance.
we're safe. I was time for a nap. Um, uh, and, but you wake up in your mid 40s and you generally, life gets a little easier and different. And you start to actually have a really big pull towards, boy, I better start making a difference in the world. And I better look where both my life force and my money and my time and energy are going, right? And that's when you really take a moment and you take a pause and you really look at, am I aligning my investments with my values? And a lot of us will step out of a career path and say the cost is too high working for these guys that I don't align with, and they aren't, whatever, you know what I'm talking about. I could see how.
Yeah,
If you're
yeah.
listening here, I know you've had a lot. If you're in your 40s or 50s, you've had that moment where you're like, I'm not doing this anymore. I've got a scaffold in my career enough. It's time for me to actually get to have agency. And at that moment, you're often looking at your investments as well and thinking, how can I actually if I put 25,000, $100,000 into a fund, does that change? Like when I go network, when I'm going to cocktail parties and meeting people and I say, oh, I'm a venture investor, it just changes how people talk to you. They
It
think of
does.
you
I
as,
think that's a really good point.
yeah.
Yeah.
And if you want to go on a corporate board and you say, yeah, one of the things I do is I invest in venture, it just changes things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a really good point. Would you say, I mean, just curious, since you're on, since going from fund one to fund three, and I know it's only been since 2020, but over 600 first-time women investing in venture, that's insane and amazing. And I guess I'm just curious if there's certain trends that you've noticed since you mentioned you've kind of like kept track of them and asked them over time, like what they're doing, investing in other funds and whatnot. Like, what do you think are the most interesting trends from maybe like that first cohort to today to how they've evolved as investors versus like the first day when they started out?
well, what I love is they get involved in the ecosystem. So they invest in other funds. They see, frankly, I don't know if it was chicken or an egg, right? I don't know if they were already doing would have been doing it otherwise, but a lot of people are starting companies that are venture backable, and I think they're understanding what that means. Anyone who's in venture knows, like, I'm going to give you the extreme example, but someone comes with the I'm going to a hair salon. That's not venture backable. Someone comes with a type of shampoo, might be venture backable, maybe kind of
Could be.
harder. But if you have a technology platform for something in the beauty industry or whatever, now that's maybe venture backable, right? Understanding what makes it venture backable and understanding when you want venture funding and when you don't. I always tell people to go read this book, Founder's Dilemma, because it's like, you can get fired from your own innovative idea and company that you built. So,
So
or
true.
you can end up selling it and not making any money. So, how you structure it and having the maturity to actually understand what point you're getting too diluted and all that stuff, I think is just essential.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really good point. If you're going to start a business, especially a venture backable business, having been an investor in venture really, really helps you understand how to build it the right way for that, or if that's not the right type of funding for you, right? For what
Exactly.
you're
Well,
trying to
and
do.
you know this. I mean, some people think they're like, oh, I'll just go get venture funding. It'll be fine.
Everybody that doesn't know anything about ventures, right?
Yeah,
Like,
not
because it's
free
like
money.
the shiny, the Emmy Award of raising capital is venture, right? Like it seems that way, but
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah. Until
and,
they're in your boardroom and they're in your face and they're like, perform, perform, perform.
yep, exactly. And you're like, why did I do this? Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So one more question, then I want to shift gears to talk about you a little bit. But what do you think keeps more women from becoming LPs or angels? Is it access? Is it education? Is it confidence? The network that they have, or like, what do you think are the biggest,
Yeah. Well, I know
barriers?
what some of them are. One is time. You don't have time to think about it. Two, you're really narrow-minded financial advisor says they don't recommend it.
True.
It
Yeah.
happens all the time. And this is the thing. First, your response is, it's my money. It's not yours. I want you to think about, if anybody listening here who's in this boat, they're disincentivized for you to move your money outside of their
Exactly. They
control.
don't get paid on it. So
Right.
why would they
And
want you
their
to make
assets
money?
under management is how they get rewarded. And so, of course, their response, even if they're a fiduciary, that is part of their sense of accomplishment, is how much money they think they get to wield and control. The other thing is, you should ask them, do you personally invest in venture capital? And the thing is, they just might not know anything about it. And
Yeah.
that isn't uncommon. And so, especially if they're not in the Silicon Valley, for example, where it's super normal. And so and I think so many of us are so busy and we're like, you know what? I hire someone to take care of that part of my life. I know how to make the money and I'm doing the thing. I just think you got to understand who you're hearing from. And I think the other thing, now this might shock some people in you, Paige, but for women in my cohort, in my 50s, who our life partner was and the agreements, unsaid agreements that we have with that life partner is a very interesting thing. If you are a woman operator who made money and was a ceiling breaker, many of us had to make a choice if we wanted to have a family in particular, not to be with the alpha A plus guy who was going to drive to make a lot of money, right? You married the plumber, or you married someone who was still threatened by you. You ended up getting divorced. Like I'm sorry, but there's just you can pretty
Yeah,
much narrow
yeah.
it down to a handful of archetypes. There are very few women my age who married someone and they're still married, and the guy had an equal career path, and you had a family. That just
Very, very rare. Yeah,
it,
I
it,
agree.
and so this is the unseen agreement that I see with a bunch of my friends and these women like me. The guy didn't really work because he couldn't be the alpha guy, right? So he managed their investments. And this is what the women say. They're saying, well, I know he's not very good at it, but I'd rather just go make more money and have no strife in my home than take the
Yep.
money, take that ownership away from him of being in charge of
I
all.
have definitely heard that. Yeah.
And so there's just very interesting things that happen. And it's
Yep.
generational probably because their egos, they hadn't, I think, my son and my son's age, he's almost 30. I just think they have a different relationship maybe with some of this stuff. But boy, it's a real thing.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is. That's none of those things are what I thought you were going to say, by the way. So super interesting hot take there.
I think
I
they're
think that's incredible.
tell me what I think.
Oh my gosh.
This is what's so fascinating. When I heard this, it knocked my socks off. Women are the primary breadwinner in 45% of heterosexual households in the United States. So this idea that there are gender roles and men are the providers is literally out the window. It is women are equal to men as breadwinners in households. That doesn't mean we get equal pay, and we should all, men and women, should all be upset when women don't get paid equally or don't have equal opportunity because it hurts your family. Because 45% of us have women as a primary breadwinner. And we're still wrestling with what is both the gender dynamic and also what are the implications of that for all kinds of parts of our lives. And I love being a student. If you don't get emotionally caught up in the what's not fair and stuff, like, and you just step back and like, wow, like fascinating. Like I've been with my husband for 36 years this month,
Wow, that's an
and he
accomplishment.
was a machine operator at a union shop. And that was perfect for us. And he was so proud of me, and he thought it was so sexy that his wife, wore business suits kind of thing. Like he's not threatened because he's a man's man, and he's, whatever that means for my generation, right?
Right,
But
right.
at our life stage, we're old and we have kids and we almost have a grandchild. My life partner is so happy to just take care of business at home and doesn't need ego fulfillment from being in charge of our finances. But we all, it's just fascinating to see what's going to happen in our generations, your generation
Exactly.
and my daughter's generation, of like how things evolve about those relationship dynamics and who
So
gets
true.
to string how and what are the implications.
It's a whole, this could be a whole podcast episode on it itself here, right? Like I could just, there's so many things I could say, but I'm not going to. I want to switch gears though and talk about you a little bit. I wanted to ask you my famous three questions, but you may have kind of already answered what one of them, or the one I'm going to ask you, which is what do you think is the most interesting inside baseball thing you've learned about venture capital, having been in the industry? That you are just surprised about or most surprised about from coming from the outside in and really seeing how it actually works. I feel like you could have 10 answers to this, but what's the most
There's there's this fascinating thing about groupthink and herd behavior. If you watch it in venture, it's really worse than it is anything else in the world, I think.
so yeah, yeah,
So there was a pitch book report that just came out 6 to 8 weeks ago, and it looked at all the largest venture funds, all run by guys because the women's are small still. 60% of the deals they make are with each other.
I'm
They're
not surprised at all.
making unique investments. And what happens is they all, and actually, there are, I think what they say, 45% of all venture investments this year have gone to 10 companies, like think OpenAI.
Of course.
So this idea that people are really great pickers and doing a great job with diligence is just silliness. And that's just not how it's working. They're not, and they're throwing spaghetti. And famously, we all know that there are trends in venture where they throw spaghetti at the wall because they have a lot of capital right now, and they just see, like, they just hope one is the billion-dollar exit. And then, but we all kind of think that supposedly venture capitalists know something and they're disciplined in diligence. It's just not how people are behaving. So there's dissonance with what we believe and what really is happening, and we just don't follow the data, which is bizarre. But, I've even seen, women behave differently than men because you don't get as much money. They're more performance driven, capital efficient. You see women, they don't go out of business. Women founders, they'll do a 2 or 3x return at some point, as opposed to going out of business early on if they can't see the 100x. There's just different behaviors. But I still see every once in a while, every quarter, there's 1 or 2 companies that come that are the hot, sexy thing, and General Catalyst and other people are investing. And I look under the hood and I'm like,
what is this? Yeah.
this doesn't make sense. And it's all overvalued. And there is no way this is going to work. And you're like, look at this herd
How did
behavior.
this? Yeah. Yeah.
And people are doing it because the big ones are on board. And I will have people on my investment committee who will, on occasion, I have to go, do you hear yourself? My investment committee is great, but I just want to say, like, it can happen. And I've even gotten caught up in, well, somebody must know something. Like, we as human beings were like, well, if all these important people are in the room, it must be something. But you got to check yourself and go, but the math doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting that herd mentality you're talking about. It's so true. I mean, we even see it having been born of a syndicate, our firm, which we still have the syndicate. People want to know. They want to know how many other people are investing in it and what the dollar amount is that people are putting in. Why, right? Because they're just thinking themselves, like, should I be doing this? I'm going to make my decision based on what everybody else in the room is doing, and I'm not going to. Because we have like this group of, it's like 140 syndicate investors, and there's a group of maybe like 20 of them who are willing to make decisions for themselves, and they'll decide if they're going to invest or not. And then, like, once there's a critical mass, then there's like the 80% of other people who just jump on board with if it's happening or not,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which is wild to me, but that is very, very much just.
And there are, in every industry, you can see this in different places in the society, but whoever's the most marginal does more disciplined work because they have to prove that they can do it. And so it'll be interesting to see, like, will women start behaving like the guys at a certain point? Or can the women's more disciplined behavior
Pervade.
evolve? And this is the thing, though, like I was talking about herd behavior, but the truth is, like, if you can't get enough people excited about this idea, and you're not going to be able to get anyone to invest in the company, I shouldn't make that investment either.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you need a little sexy gloss and
Yes, too.
but
Yeah.
too much of it so that it whitewashes, like it's somehow you're not actually doing diligence or using your rational brain. Like,
It's such a balance.
but you think venture as an industry is all super smart, disciplined people, and it's, I just know, like, I help people get on corporate boards. I play in some big financial institutions as a leader. I see it everywhere.
It doesn't end. It doesn't.
You know
Yeah.
what? Like, the reality is, like, respect everybody, because the person who cleans your house is probably more disciplined and better at math than some of the people that you're in a boardroom with, to be honest. They
Yeah.
don't have the same opportunities. I'm really serious about that. Like, I'm a big believer in equal opportunity, brains and talent and discipline and commitment. And a lot of us can get pretty lazy.
Yeah. 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 Okay. So next question I want to ask you is, what has been your biggest failure, and what did you learn from it?
Oh, for crying out loud. So very many things I've not done well in my life. I mean, to be honest, if you just want to know about me as a person, I probably still keep making some of these same mistakes. I don't believe in micromanagement. I hate it. I don't want to do it. I'm a big believer in hiring great people and trusting them. And I have Peter principled people, or I have trusted someone to the point where it's like, boy, the evidence was really clear. Not that they're untrustworthy people necessarily, but sometimes. But just like, I I still want to believe that I do believe at the core everybody's trying to do the best that they can. But I do think when people realize that they're not performing, then the bad behavior shows up because they got to blame somebody instead of taking accountability for themselves if they aren't doing a great job. So most of my failures, I would say, is giving people too much leash or trusting people too much. And I made one investment that has failed. And
Only one
I
ever.
knew it. I know I'm surprisingly, right? But like women don't go out of business very often, right? And so I only invest in companies founded by women. So let's be clear. But this one person, I knew it in the diligence process. And this was my first fund, and I was doing it with somebody else. And I let that person over, I let them be the one who was leading almost in that discussion. And afterwards, I was like, that was a mistake. I need to trust myself and I should never again. And now I'm a solo GP because I don't want to ever do that again. I'm responsible for the decisions. And in that case, I abdicated my gut. This person literally tried to in the diligence process tried to convince us that tried to say Philip Morris was now a healthcare company. And at the time I was like, I can't believe I challenged. I was like, that is ridiculous. I can't believe you just said that. And then did all these gymnastics to backpedal and whatever, and ended up not contracting with Philip Morris on something. And I let the other people involved in the decision-making process say that we should still go ahead. And of course, that person was not an honest person. And a year later, they went out of business. And we were like, we're going to bring in another CEO. And the person literally had their ego was so big, they wouldn't allow us to replace them to save the value of the company. And this person had too much ownership.
Yeah, that's, yep, yep.
Anyway.
I totally see that. Yeah. I mean, your gut
Talk about
in these
where
things
you're
is,
like, you look back and you're like, I saw it. I saw
yep.
it.
I know. This is about you, not me, but I'll give you one example. I invested in one of the first female-backed companies we invested in. It went bankrupt, and it's one of the few, I think maybe the only women-founded company we've invested in that's the case also, now that I think about it, now that you're saying that. But it was like I knew at the time there weren't a lot of female founders, frankly. Like there just weren't a lot of them, and there still aren't, right? But finding them is hard, and finding good ones is even harder. And I was willing to overlook wanting it to be a female founder in our portfolio more than the actual founder themselves, which they have to be able to hold their own themselves anyway. And even though there were flags there about the way they communicated and just the way that they were thinking through business problems, that I thought I could just tell that this was not someone that's going to like skyrocket a company to the moon, and did it anyway. And it shouldn't have been that, right? Like I should have trusted my own reaction there. But anyway, last question.
You would like to think that from now on, you will never make a mistake of not trusting yourself ever again. And I don't know, maybe you're way better than I am, but it's hard to
Inevitable.
for real and never ever make a mistake again. But
Yeah, you can't get everything right, but you can like if you can learn from your mistakes and improve your ability to make more decisions correctly, right? At least that's what I believe. And then the last question for you is, what's the best advice you've ever received?
such a great question. I really think I think it's to trust yourself, and you know more than you think you do. And the other thing is don't press send. So, wait a minute.
Oh yeah, that's 100%. I literally have my emails set on a exiting timer so that if I do that, I can always pull it back up for like 2 minutes, Like sometimes it only takes 1 minute longer to think about it.
And
It's a good one.
it's like an emotional release.
Mm-hmm.
Send, and then you're like, this isn't gonna actually go well on the other
Yeah.
end of this.
No, it's gonna make things worse. Yeah. That's good. I really like that. I love the tangibility of that specific answer. Thank you.
Well, let's just hope I keep remembering it, because I think I keep, I have my moments.
Well, I literally can't remember it. That's why I had it on. I have a delayed send set on for that exact reason. Um, But anyway, this was amazing. I can't thank you enough for being here. Do you have any other final thoughts or anything else you think is worth sharing on this topic? I mean, this topic is your life, so I'm sure it's very hard to condense it down to like a 45-minute podcast, but you tell me.
Well, I'm a really big believer that this is the wave of women's wealth, operational expertise, power and influence is literally we're cresting in this moment. And you see the national political environment is pushing, they're scared to death because supposedly men they don't know what their role is in the world. And it's like, please, like, whatever, let's move on from that. Um, uh, but we have an opportunity and don't waste it. Don't waste it. Because, you want equal pay, begging some guy to change his behavior is not something that's going to happen anytime soon. And so you want better culture and environments for women who work, and you got to actually you got to step in. So don't complain unless you're going to do something about it. That's all I have to say about that.
Love it. Absolutely love it. And like I said, this was amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time. Busy women, right? Like I know you're doing a million billion things, and to spend this hour with us is so important.
Oh,
So
well,
thank
thank you
you.
for all your work. And, we're the ones we've been waiting for. So, and, take this very seriously. Paige and I are both taking a huge hit for the team because I don't know about you, but like I haven't gotten paid yet. So, it's not like you're making real money on a venture fund in the first 5 to 10 years. You gotta get scale and prove your thesis before you can actually take a salary. For most of us.
Most
So,
people don't realize that, but yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
I don't think people understand it. So like, invest in the people who are the first ones in, because that's how we're going to build a big industry that really fuels job creation and culture in the future.
Love it. Well, that's a wrap.